Hi, it's Edie here. I help people who are stressed out own their lives through developing powerful self-care practices, also known as habits. In a previous video, I started talking about how to stop a habit that is not serving us well. And we're going to go over the principles of that, and I will continue talking about my journey to stop smoking. It's almost 20 years ago, because I think it is symbolic of how it is that we stop anything. So to form a new habit, we've got to remind ourselves everywhere, we've got to make it fun, we've got to make it small and doable, and we've got to celebrate it. But to stop something, we've got to make it close to invisible. We have to not be able to see it, and we want to not be triggered by it. We've got to make it ugly. We've got to notice how awful it is. Then we've got to find ways to make it more difficult to get to make it more difficult to reach for, or we got to make it harder to do. And then we really have to notice how not fun it is, how much negative outcomes we have from this action. So you'll remember that, or maybe you won't, maybe you didn't see the other video, but the rules that I put in place before I knew all this research about habits, the rules that I had put in place were if I wanted to smoke, I could. If I wanted to smoke, I had to buy a carton. If I wanted just one cigarette, I had to buy a carton. And I could never smoke someone else's cigarette. Now, that seemed to work for me. So in August of '95, I had the last cigarette I've had so far in my life. And my intention is that's the last cigarette I will have in my life. But since I know I'm an addict, I know that this day I have made a commitment that I will not have a cigarette. And each day we only can do one day at a time. So I can only live today. I can actually only live this moment, and I'm so excited to be with you for this moment. I can only live this moment. I can only live this day. I can only live this life. So why was this genius? And it wasn't my genius. I was through prayer. It was through a lot of thought and a lot of journaling. And so I really do think that I was led to these commitments. And I was somehow able to make those commitments stick. One of the things that we don't talk about as much, that we do need to talk about, is you got to have a why. Now, I talked in the other video about losing my brother, 49 years old, and he's gone. He's gone. And he was a heavy smoker, he was a heavy drinker, and he was a heavy man. So I decided that these things were not going to be part of my life. I did not want to have a heart attack and die very young. And now that I'm getting to be an old lady, I can say I've succeeded in that part. I'm getting too old to die young, but I'm still too young to die. But why did this work? I had to have a why. And so wanting to live was my biggest why. But there was more to it. I wanted to be a good example. I wanted to not pass on this addiction to the generations. And it makes me sad that I have a daughter who still smokes. She still struggles with the same thing, but I get it. It's an addiction, and it's hard to stop. And I know her heart, and I know that it's something that she will find her way through. So you gotta hide it from yourself. So one of the things that I did, because I made these commitments that if I wanted to smoke, I could. If I wanted to smoke, I had to buy a carton, and I could never smoke somebody else's cigarette while I was still smoking. And so I forced myself to chunk out the change for a carton of cigarettes. And I think I bought 2 or 3 cartons before I was like, oh, bag this. This is way too much money. Especially since since I had a carton and I always had more, or almost always had more, I was smoking more. Having a carton on hand did exactly what I thought it would do, which would be not put a brake on how much I smoked. And so it was getting expensive. But I hid the carton in the freezer. And so I would have to go to the freezer to get my next cigarette instead of keeping it in the cute little case. Oh my goodness, they were so cute. The cute little case with the cigarette lighter in it. So adorable. I always got the cute ones. Used to keep it next to my command chair. Well, I didn't call it the command chair then, but that's where I ran the world, was from my command chair. And I used to keep it there and keep an ashtray right there. So I hid it from myself, put it in the freezer. I stopped emptying the ashtray. I never did like to see an ashtray that was full of stuff. And I thought that was ugly. So I did make it ugly. Because it was in the freezer, because it was not available to me, it was hidden from me, it was harder to do. And I put rules around it. So one of the rules I finally put on it was I wouldn't smoke inside the house anymore. And so I'd have to go outside. And of course, when it's icky out, and of course, a lot now, with all the changes in laws around that, we have to go outside a lot of times. And when I was still smoking, and it was in a snowstorm in Colorado, and I'd have to go outside for my break, I was like, why am I doing this? This is crazy. So I had to go outside. And then I started connecting, thinking about the negative outcomes of smoking. I had sinus problems all the time. I always had gunk. My mouth tasted like, yeah. And so I started really connecting that to the cigarettes. I really started connecting the way the car smelled to the cigarettes. I got my car vacuumed out really well and put something that smelled good in it, and I could still smell it. And so I made it not fun. Now these were all in addition to the commitments that I made to myself. So the commitments that I made came from my own personal journey. Those commitments might not work for you. You might not be one who starts smoking. Every time I really started smoking again, it was on somebody else's cigarette. I would bum a cigarette, just one. I only wanted one. And then I'd be off and running again. And so the commitments I made to myself might not be the commitments that you want to make to yourself. But if you know your why, and you know how to put parameters on your behavior, and you make a strong commitment to yourself, you can stop doing what you've been doing that is harming you. But you gotta know why. And you gotta give yourself grace. I made these commitments and I continued to smoke for another 2 months because I wasn't ready. I had to continue to get ready. Now I was doing some of the other things, right? I was hiding my cigarettes from me. I was buying it by the carton. I was not emptying the ashtray. I was making myself go outside to do it. And when I actually quit, I lived in Northwest Florida. I had left dispatch and gone to Florida for a while. And I started really connecting my health to my habit, which is really hard to do. It's really hard to own our outcomes. It's so easy to just not feel good and not connected to what we're putting in our bodies, or how we're not moving our bodies, or how we are moving our bodies. In our relationships, it's easy to put it on somebody else. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much.